The silver serving tray trembled in Eleanor's hands as another crude laugh erupted from the table of miners, their voices thick with whiskey and contempt, and she knew this night would be no different from all the others that had worn her spirit down to nothing. She'd been working at the Rusty Nail Saloon in Taylorsville, Utah for 8 months now, ever since her father died in a mining accident and left her with debts she could never hope to repay on her own. It was 1878, and opportunities for a 20-year-old woman alone in the world were scarce as rain in August. The saloon owner, a greasy man named Polk, who smelled of tobacco and broken promises, had offered her work serving drinks and meals to the rough men who frequented his establishment. She had no choice but to accept. "Well, well, if it isn't our favorite little mouse," sneered Jack Carson, a particularly nasty piece of work who seemed to take special pleasure in making her life miserable. He was a stocky man with yellowed teeth and a cruel streak that ran deep. "Scurrying around with your head down like always." Eleanor set down the plates of beans and cornbread as quickly as she could, keeping her eyes lowered. She had learned that meeting their gazes only encouraged them. "What's the matter, girl? You too good to look at us?" another miner called out, his words slurring together. "We pay good money here." "Actually, you have not paid in 3 weeks, Donnelly," Eleanor said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. It was true. Several of the men ran tabs that grew longer each month, and Polk took the shortage from her wages. The table went silent for a moment, and Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She had made a mistake. Jack Carson stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "You calling us deadbeats, girl? You think you can talk to us like that?" "I did not mean," Eleanor started, but Carson grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to bruise. "Maybe we need to teach you some manners," he said, yanking her closer. The other men at the table laughed, and Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes, even as she fought to keep them from falling. She would not give them the satisfaction. "Let her go." The voice came from the doorway, deep and rough as granite grinding against granite. Every head in the saloon turned toward the source. The man who stood there was unlike anyone Eleanor had ever seen. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad he nearly filled the doorframe. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that struck her gray as a winter storm, and just as fierce. He wore buckskin clothing that marked him as a mountain man, someone who lived in the wild territories away from civilization. Muscles rippled beneath the worn leather as he moved forward, and Eleanor noticed the way his hands hung loose at his sides, ready for anything. "This is none of your concern, stranger," Carson said, but his voice had lost some of its bravado. He did not release Eleanor's wrist, though. "I am making it my concern." The mountain man moved closer, each step deliberate and controlled. "The lady asked you nicely about your bill. Seems to me you owe her an apology along with your payment." Carson's face flushed red. "You do not know who you are dealing with. There are 5 of us, and 1 of you." "I can count." The stranger's voice held no fear, only a quiet certainty that sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. "Now let her go, or I will make you let her go. Your choice." For a long moment, no one moved. The entire saloon had gone quiet, watching the standoff. Then Carson released Eleanor's wrist with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. The mountain man caught her elbow, steadying her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his intimidating presence. "You will regret this," Carson spat, but he was already moving toward the door, his companions following. They knew when they were outmatched, even drunk as they were. After they left, the saloon slowly returned to its normal noise level, though Eleanor could feel curious eyes still watching them. She looked up at the man who had intervened, really seeing him for the first time. Up close, he was even more imposing, but there was kindness in those storm-gray eyes that made her feel safer than she had in months. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." He released her arm, and she found herself missing the warmth of his touch immediately. "Are you hurt?" Eleanor rubbed her wrist where Carson had grabbed her. It ached, but nothing was broken. "I will be fine. I am used to it." Something dark flashed across the mountain man's face. "You should not have to be used to it. No woman should." "Well, life is not always what it should be," Eleanor said with more bitterness than she intended. "I have a debt to work off, and this is the only job I could find. So I serve the men, even when they mock me, even when they hurt me, because I have no other choice." The stranger studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. Finally, he spoke. "My name is Harrison Xavier. People call me Hawk." "Eleanor Reeves," she replied, offering a small curtsy that felt ridiculous given the circumstances. But her mother had raised her to have manners even in the worst situations. "How much is your debt, Miss Reeves?" The question took her by surprise. "I do not see how that is." "How much?" There was something in his tone that made her answer honestly. $347. My father owed money to several people when he died, and I have been paying it back as best I can, but the interest keeps growing, and Mr. Polk takes most of my wages for room and board, and—" She stopped herself, horrified that she was spilling her troubles to a complete stranger. Harrison's jaw tightened beneath his beard. "Wait here." He strode across the saloon to where Polk stood behind the bar, watching the exchange with calculating eyes. Eleanor could not hear their conversation, but she saw Harrison pull out a leather pouch and count out bills onto the scarred wooden surface. Polk's eyes widened, and he nodded eagerly, his greasy face split by a wide smile. When Harrison returned to her side, he took her hand in his much larger one. His palm was calloused and warm, the hand of a man who worked hard and lived harder. "You are free of your debt, Miss Reeves. Gather your things. You are leaving this place." Eleanor's mind reeled. "What? I can't. You just paid. I do not understand. I paid your debt and 3 months of wages on top of it. You do not work here anymore." His gray eyes held hers. "I am taking you away from this place. You deserve to be served, not to serve men who treat you like dirt beneath their boots." "But I do not know you. Why would you do this for me?" Eleanor's heart was racing, torn between hope and fear. What did this man want from her? No one did anything for free, especially not for a woman alone in the world. "Because it is the right thing to do," Harrison said simply. "I have a cabin up in the mountains, about a day's ride from here. I come to town maybe twice a year for supplies. I saw you through the window before I came in, saw how those men treated you, and I knew I could not walk away. I will not hurt you, Miss Reeves. I'm offering you a safe place to stay until you figure out what you want to do with your life. No strings, no expectations, just safety and respect." Eleanor looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity there. Maybe she was a fool, maybe she would regret this, but anything had to be better than staying here. She had been so tired for so long, tired of the mocking, tired of the fear, tired of feeling worthless. This stranger was offering her a chance at something different, something better. "All right," she whispered, "let me get my things." She had precious few belongings to gather. Everything she owned fit into a single worn carpet bag: 2 dresses, a few undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small tintype photograph of her parents on their wedding day. She changed out of her stained serving dress into her better one, a plain gray cotton that was still shabby but at least clean. When she came back downstairs, Harrison was waiting by the door, his expression patient. Polk tried to stop her, mumbling something about needing notice, but Harrison fixed him with such a fierce look that the saloon owner backed away, his protests dying on his lips. Then they were outside in the cool evening air, and Eleanor felt as if she could breathe properly for the first time in months. Harrison led her to where 2 horses waited, both strong-looking animals built for mountain terrain. One was a huge bay gelding that suited Harrison's size perfectly, and the other was a smaller but sturdy paint mare with intelligent eyes. "You can ride?" Harrison asked as he secured her bag to the paint saddle. "Yes. My father taught me when I was young." It had been years, but Eleanor hoped it was the kind of skill you did not forget. "Good. We will ride until dark, then make camp. I want to get clear of town before those men decide to cause trouble." He helped her mount, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and Eleanor felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. They rode out of Taylorsville as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Eleanor looked back only once at the town that had been her prison for 8 months, then turned her face forward toward the mountains rising in the distance. She did not know what lay ahead, but it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. Harrison set a steady pace, not pushing the horses too hard, but keeping them moving. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, following trails that Eleanor could barely see in the fading light. She watched him as they rode, noting the easy way he sat his horse, the constant awareness in how he scanned their surroundings. This was a man who was completely at home in the wilderness, she realized. The town had probably felt as uncomfortable to him as the wild would feel to her. As darkness fell, Harrison led them to a sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang. There was a fire ring already there, suggesting he had used this campsite before. While Eleanor tended the horses, unsaddling them and rubbing them down with handfuls of grass, Harrison built a fire with quick, efficient movements. Soon flames crackled cheerfully, pushing back the night's chill. "You are good with horses," Harrison observed, watching her work. "My father ran a stable before he went into mining," Eleanor explained, giving the paint mare a final pat. "I spent more time with horses than people when I was growing up." "I know the feeling." Harrison pulled supplies from his saddlebags, dried meat, hardtack, and a battered coffee pot. "It is not fancy, but it will fill your belly." They ate in companionable silence, and Eleanor marveled at how comfortable she felt with this stranger. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was something about Harrison himself, the quiet strength he radiated, the respectful distance he maintained. He had built her a separate bedroll on the other side of the fire, making it clear he meant what he said about no expectations. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said finally, cradling a tin cup of coffee between her hands. "Of course." "Why do you live up in the mountains alone? Were you always a mountain man?" Harrison gazed into the fire, and for a moment Eleanor thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I was not always alone. I had a wife once, and a little girl. This was back in Missouri before I came west. There was a fever that swept through our town. They both died within days of each other. I buried them on a hillside under an oak tree, and then I left. I could not stay in that place anymore, could not walk past the house we had shared, or see the things my daughter had loved. So I came west, kept moving until I found a place that felt right. That was 5 years ago." "I am so sorry," Eleanor said, her heart aching for him. "I lost my mother when I was 15, then my father last year. I know what it is like to have your whole world torn away." "I figured you did. There is a look people get when they have known real loss. You have it." Harrison looked up at her across the fire. "I am not offering you anything more than safety and a place to heal. Miss Reeves, I want to be clear about that. My heart got buried on that hillside in Missouri, and I do not expect to get it back." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "I am not looking for anything except a chance to figure out who I am without being afraid all the time. If you are offering that, I am grateful." "Then we have an understanding." Harrison stood and added more wood to the fire. "Get some sleep. We have a long ride tomorrow, and the mountain trails are not easy." Eleanor lay down on the bedroll he had prepared, wrapping herself in the thick blankets. The ground was hard beneath her, and strange sounds filled the night animals calling, the wind sighing through the trees, the crackle and pop of the fire. She should have been terrified, alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew. Instead, she felt safer than she had in months. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was of Harrison's storm-gray eyes and the unexpected kindness she had found in them. She woke before dawn to find Harrison already up, the fire rebuilt and coffee brewing. He handed her a cup without speaking, and she sipped it gratefully, letting the bitter warmth chase away the morning chill. They broke camp efficiently, working together as if they had done this many times before, and then they were riding again, climbing higher into the mountains. The landscape changed as they ascended. The sparse valleys gave way to pine forests that filled the air with their sharp, clean scent. Streams rushed down rocky slopes, their water so clear Eleanor could see every stone on the bottom. Wildlife was everywhere, deer that bounded away at their approach, squirrels chattering in the trees, even a black bear that watched them pass from a respectful distance. Harrison seemed completely at ease, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the territory. "We are still about 6 hours from my cabin," he said as they stopped to water the horses at a creek around midday. "The trail gets rougher from here. Are you holding up all right?" Eleanor stretched her aching back. It had been years since she had ridden this long, and her muscles were protesting. "I will make it." Harrison studied her with those perceptive eyes. "We can rest longer if you need." "No, I want to keep going." She did not want him to think her weak, this strong man who had appeared in her life like something out of a story. She wanted to prove she could handle this new life she had chosen. They pushed on through the afternoon. The trail grew steeper and narrower, winding between massive pines and along cliff edges that made Eleanor's heart leap into her throat. But Harrison guided them surely, his big bay gelding navigating the treacherous path with the confidence of long practice, and the paint mare followed faithfully. The sun was low in the sky when they finally crested a ridge, and Harrison pointed ahead. There, home. Eleanor looked where he indicated and saw a cabin nestled in a small valley. It was larger than she had expected, built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A covered porch ran along the front, and there was a separate building she guessed was a stable. Behind the cabin, the mountains rose up in jagged peaks, still capped with snow, even though it was late summer. "It is beautiful," she breathed, and she meant it. After months in the dirty, cramped room above the saloon, this seemed like paradise. "It is home," Harrison said simply, and there was something in his voice, a softness, a contentment that had not been there before. They rode down into the valley as the last light faded from the sky. Harrison helped her dismount, and Eleanor's legs nearly buckled. She had been in the saddle for 2 days straight, and her body was not used to such punishment. "Easy," Harrison said, steadying her with his hands on her shoulders. "Go inside and rest. I will take care of the horses." Eleanor wanted to argue, to help, but her body had other ideas. She stumbled to the cabin and pushed open the door, finding herself in a large single room. There was a fireplace with a mantel, a sturdy table with chairs, a small kitchen area with a cast-iron stove, and in the far corner, a bed covered with what looked like bearskin. The walls were decorated with various tools and hunting implements, and everything was neat and clean, which surprised her. She had expected a bachelor's mess. She sank into one of the chairs at the table and must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Harrison was crouching beside her, concern written across his bearded face. "Miss Reeves, Eleanor." "I am sorry," she mumbled, forcing herself upright. "I did not mean to fall asleep." "You are exhausted. When did you last have a full night's sleep?" Eleanor tried to remember and could not. "I do not know. Months, maybe." Harrison's expression darkened. "That place worked you near to death. Come on, you need proper rest." He helped her to her feet and guided her toward the bed. Eleanor's foggy mind registered that it was his bed, the only bed, and she pulled back. "I cannot take your bed. Where will you sleep?" "I will make a pallet by the fire. It is fine. I have done it many times before." He pulled back the bearskin cover. "Please, Eleanor, you need this." She was too tired to argue anymore. She crawled into the bed, barely managing to remove her boots first, and felt the softness of the mattress embrace her. It was stuffed with something, pine needles maybe. That smelled wonderful and felt like heaven after months of a lumpy cot. Harrison pulled the cover over her, and his hand brushed her forehead gently, checking for fever perhaps, or maybe just offering comfort. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, "for everything." "Sleep," Harrison said softly. "You are safe now." And she was. For the first time since her father died, Eleanor felt truly safe. She let herself sink into sleep, deep and dreamless and healing. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the cabin's windows, and delicious smells filled the air. Eleanor sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. She had slept in her dress, rumpled and wrinkled, but she felt more rested than she had in longer than she could remember. Harrison stood at the stove, cooking something in a large skillet. He had his back to her, and Eleanor took the opportunity to really look at him in the daylight. He had removed his buckskin jacket, and his shirt stretched tight across the broad muscles of his back and shoulders. His dark hair was tied back with a strip of leather, revealing the strong lines of his profile. He moved with the same economy of motion she had noticed before, no wasted energy, everything purposeful and sure. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Harrison turned, and a smile creased his bearded face. "Good afternoon, you mean. You slept 14 hours. 14. Eleanor looked at the angle of the sun in shock. "Why did you not wake me?" "Because you needed the rest." "Are you hungry?" Her stomach answered for her with a loud growl, and Harrison chuckled. The sound was rusty, as if he did not laugh often, but it was warm and genuine. He dished food onto tin plates, eggs, fried potatoes, and thick slices of bacon, and brought them to the table. Eleanor ate ravenously, barely remembering her manners. The food was simple but delicious, cooked perfectly, and seasoned with salt and some herbs she did not recognize. When she finally came up for air, she found Harrison watching her with an expression that might have been satisfaction. "Better?" he asked. "Much, thank you." Eleanor looked around the cabin again, seeing details she had missed in her exhaustion the night before. There were books on a shelf near the fireplace, more than she would have expected a mountain man to own. A rocking chair sat in one corner, and various furs hung on the walls. "Your home is very nice." "It serves." Harrison finished his own meal and carried the plates to a wash bucket. "I built it 6 years ago when I first came to these mountains, added onto it since then." "You built this yourself?" Eleanor could not hide her amazement. "Every log. It took 2 summers, but I had nothing but time." He dried his hands on a cloth. "I need to check my trap lines today. You should stay here and rest more. There is food in the cold cellar. I dug it into the hillside out back and water in the barrel by the door. Make yourself at home." "I could come with you," Eleanor offered, though part of her quailed at the thought of more riding. Harrison shook his head. "Not today. You are still recovering. Besides, I move fast when I am working the lines, and you would not enjoy it. Tomorrow, if you are feeling better, I will show you around the valley." He left soon after, and Eleanor found herself alone in the cabin. For a while she simply sat, enjoying the quiet and the sense of peace that permeated this place. Then her natural industriousness kicked in. She could not just sit idle when there was work to be done. She found cleaning supplies and set about tidying the cabin, though it was already quite clean. She washed the breakfast dishes, swept the floor, and made up the bed with fresh linens she found in a trunk. In the cold cellar, she discovered not only food supplies, but also vegetables and herbs, evidence that Harrison maintained a garden somewhere nearby. She made a stew with venison, potatoes, carrots, and onions, letting it simmer slowly on the stove so it would be ready when he returned. As she worked, Eleanor found herself thinking about the man who had saved her. Harrison Xavier was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was rough and lived a solitary life in the wilderness, yet he was also gentle and thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He had paid her debt without asking for anything in return, offered her safety without conditions. Men like that were rare as hen's teeth, especially in her experience. But he had also been clear that his heart was not available. He was still mourning his wife and daughter, still carrying that grief like a physical weight. Eleanor understood that kind of loss she carried her own, but she sensed his went even deeper. He had not just lost his family, he had lost his whole life, everything he thought his future would be. Coming to the mountains had been a kind of death for him too, a burial of the man he had been. Eleanor found that she respected that. She was not looking for romance either. She just wanted to figure out who she was beyond the frightened girl serving drinks to cruel men. Maybe here, in this beautiful, isolated place, she could find that person again. The girl she had been before her mother died, before poverty ground her down, before she learned to make herself small and invisible to survive. Harrison returned as the sun was setting, carrying several rabbit pelts and looking satisfied with his day's work. He stopped short when he entered the cabin, his nose twitching. "You have been cooking." "I made stew. I hope that's all right. I used some of your stores." "Of course it's all right. This is your home now, too." He hung the pelts outside to finish drying, then came back in and washed his hands thoroughly. When he sat down to eat, his eyes closed in appreciation at the first bite. "This is delicious. I've not had cooking this good since, well, in a long time." They ate together as twilight deepened into night, and Eleanor felt a strange contentment settle over her. This was nice, she thought, just sitting with someone who did not mock her or leer at her or make her feel worthless, someone who seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. "Tell me about your life before," Harrison said after a while, "before the saloon." So Eleanor did. She told him about growing up in a small town in Colorado, about her father's stable and how she used to help him train horses. She told him about her mother, who had been a teacher and taught Eleanor to read and write and love books. She told him about the happy years before her mother got sick and the harder years after, when it was just her and her father struggling to make ends meet. And finally, She told him about her father's decision to try mining, how he thought it would solve their money problems, and how instead it had killed him and left her with nothing. Harrison listened without interrupting, his gray eyes focused on her face, and Eleanor felt heard in a way she had not in years. When she finished, there were tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears, cleansing tears. "You have been through hell," Harrison said quietly, "but you survived. That takes strength, Eleanor." "I do not feel strong. I feel like I barely held on." "That is what strength is. Not never falling, but getting back up every time you do." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his much larger one. "You're safe now. You can take time to heal." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his so big and calloused and warm, hers small and pale against his sun-darkened skin. Something sparked in her chest, a feeling she had thought long dead. Not attraction exactly, or maybe it was that, but deeper somehow. Recognition, perhaps. A sense that this person understood her in ways others could not. Harrison seemed to realize he was holding her hand and pulled back, clearing his throat. "You must be tired again. I should let you rest." "Will you tell me about your family?" Eleanor asked before he could retreat entirely. "You told me you lost them, but what were they like?" Pain flashed across Harrison's face, but he did not refuse. "My wife's name was Mary. We met when we were both 15 and married as soon as we were old enough. She was small and blonde and laughed at everything. She made the world seem brighter just by being in it. Our daughter Sarah, she had Mary's laugh but my eyes. She was 4 when they died. Just 4 years old, barely started her life." His voice cracked, and he stopped, swallowing hard. I am sorry I asked," Eleanor said softly. "I did not mean to cause you pain." "No, it's all right. I do not talk about them enough. Sometimes I'm afraid I will forget what Mary's laugh sounded like, or the way Sarah would grab my leg and demand I pick her up. Talking about them keeps them alive in a way." He met her eyes. "They would have liked you, I think. Mary especially. She was always taking in strays, trying to help people." "Is that what I am? A stray?" "We are all strays out here," Harrison said. "People who did not fit anywhere else, looking for a place to belong." Over the following days, a routine developed. Harrison would rise early to work his traplines or hunt, and Eleanor would tend the cabin and the garden she discovered behind it. She was surprised by how extensive it was: rows of vegetables, herbs growing in neat patches, even a small section of wheat. Harrison explained that he had to be mostly self-sufficient since town was so far away. He had learned to grow, hunt, preserve, and make almost everything he needed. Eleanor threw herself into the work with an energy that surprised her. At the saloon, she had dragged through her days, exhausted and hopeless. Here, she woke with purpose. She weeded the garden, harvested vegetables, and learned from Harrison how to preserve them for winter. She helped him smoke meat and fish from the creek that ran through the valley. She mended his clothes, finding satisfaction in making neat, small stitches that would hold. Harrison, for his part, seemed to appreciate her presence more than he wanted to admit. He talked more as the days passed, pointing out wildlife and plants, teaching her about the mountains and how to read the signs nature provided. He showed her where the best berries grew and how to tell poisonous mushrooms from safe ones. He taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance and aim until she could hit a target more often than not. "You never know when you might need to defend yourself or hunt for food," he explained. "Out here, everyone needs to know how to use a gun." Eleanor found she had a natural aptitude for it, which pleased Harrison and secretly pleased her too. She was learning to be strong in new ways, capable in ways the saloon had never allowed. One evening, about 2 weeks after she arrived, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Eleanor had brought out the book she was reading, one of Harrison's, a collection of poetry, and Harrison was working on a new pair of snowshoes, getting ready for winter, even though it was still months away. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said, setting down the book. "Always? Why did you really bring me here? The truth, not just that it was the right thing to do." Harrison's hands stilled on the snowshoe frame. For a long moment he did not answer, and Eleanor thought maybe she had overstepped. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough with emotion. "When I looked through that saloon window and saw you, saw the defeat in your eyes and the way those men treated you, it was like looking at myself. Not literally, but I saw someone who had given up, someone just going through the motions of living without any hope it would get better. And I thought, I have been that person for 5 years now, living but not alive, existing but not really present. And if I could help you, maybe it would prove that there was still some good in the world, that not everything was as dark as it felt after Mary and Sarah died. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. You saved me, Harrison. In every way a person can be saved. Maybe we saved each other, he said quietly, meeting her gaze. Because having you here, it has made this place feel like a home again, instead of just somewhere I'm hiding from the world. Something shifted between them in that moment, a wall coming down that had been keeping them at a careful distance. Eleanor saw it in Harrison's eyes, felt it in her own chest, the recognition that what was growing between them was more than just gratitude or companionship. But Harrison looked away first, returning to his work on the snowshoes. It is getting cold. You should go inside. Eleanor did not argue, though she was not particularly cold. She understood he needed space, needed time to process whatever he was feeling. She went inside and prepared for bed, but sleep was long in coming. She lay in Harrison's bed. She had tried to insist he take it back, but he refused and thought about the mountain man who had taken her away from her nightmare and given her a chance to be served instead of always serving others. The next morning, Harrison was quieter than usual. He ate breakfast quickly and left to check his traps without asking if she wanted to come along, as he sometimes did. Eleanor tried not to feel hurt. She knew he was wrestling with his feelings, just as she was wrestling with hers. She spent the day working in the garden and preparing vegetables for pickling. It was satisfying work, and she lost herself in the rhythm of it. She was so focused that she did not hear the horses approaching until they were nearly at the cabin. Eleanor looked up to see 3 men riding into the valley, and her heart seized with fear. Even from a distance, she recognized them. Jack Carson and 2 of his friends from the saloon, the ones who had tormented her most. She dropped her basket of vegetables and ran for the cabin, reaching Harrison's rifle just as the men dismounted. Her hands shook as she loaded it, the way Harrison had taught her, and she positioned herself by the window. Carson kicked open the door without knocking, his face twisted with anger. "There you are, you little—" He stopped short when he saw the rifle pointed at his chest. "Get out," Eleanor said, and she was proud that her voice did not shake even though her hands were trembling. "You are not welcome here. You think you can just run off with some mountain man and not face consequences?" Carson sneered. "You owe me, girl. I had plans for you once your debt was paid." "Harrison paid my debt. I owe you nothing." "Where is this Harrison?" one of the other men asked, looking around nervously. "That big son of a gun scared the hell out of us back in town." "He is out checking traps," Carson said, having apparently scouted the area before approaching. "We have time to teach this girl a lesson and be gone before he gets back." They started forward, and Eleanor pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder hard enough to bruise, and the bullet splintered the doorframe inches from Carson's head. The men froze. "The next one goes in your chest," Eleanor said, already reloading the way Harrison had taught her. I said, "Get out." "You missed," Carson said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I did not miss. I hit exactly what I was aiming at. Now get on your horses and leave, or I will shoot you and let the wolves have your bodies." For a moment, no one moved. Then one of Carson's companions backed toward the door. "She is crazy, Jack, and that mountain man will kill us if he comes back and finds us here." Carson's face was purple with rage, but he was not stupid. He backed away too, keeping his eyes on Eleanor. "This is not over, girl. Nobody makes a fool of Jack Carson." "It is over," Eleanor said coldly. "You so much as come near this valley again, and I will shoot you on sight. That is a promise." The men left, mounting their horses and riding away much faster than they had arrived. Eleanor kept the rifle trained on them until they disappeared from view. Then she sagged against the wall, shaking all over now that the danger had passed. That was how Harrison found her when he came back an hour later. He took in the scene, the rifle, the bullet hole in the doorframe, Eleanor's pale face, and his expression went hard as granite. "Tell me what happened," Eleanor explained, her words tumbling over each other. Harrison listened without interrupting, but she could see the fury building in him, leashed but barely controlled. "You did exactly right," he said when she finished. "I am proud of you for standing up to them, but this is my fault. I should have known they would come after you." How could you have known? You paid my debt fairly. Men like Carson do not care about fair. They care about power and control. Harrison checked the rifle, saw it was loaded, and set it within easy reach. They will be back, maybe with more men. I need to end this. What are you going to do? I'm going to town tomorrow and settling this once and for all. His gray eyes met hers, fierce and protective. No one threatens you and gets away with it. No one. Eleanor felt her heart stutter at the intensity in his voice. This was not just about doing the right thing anymore. Harrison was protecting her because she mattered to him, because the thought of anyone hurting her made him feel things he had thought buried with his family. Do not do anything that will get you killed, she said quietly. Please, Harrison, I could not bear it if something happened to you because of me. He crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands. Nothing is going to happen to me, but I need you to understand I cannot let this go. I cannot let them think they can come here and terrorize you. This is your home now, and you deserve to feel safe in it. I do feel safe. I feel safe when you are here. The words came out as a whisper, but Eleanor meant them with every fiber of her being. Harrison's thumb traced her cheekbone gently, and his eyes searched hers. Eleanor, Whatever he had been about to say was lost as he seemed to catch himself. He dropped his hands and stepped back, that wall slamming back into place between them. I will leave at first light, he said gruffly. I should be back in 2 days. I'm going to teach you how to secure the cabin before I go, and I want you to keep the rifle loaded at all times. If anyone comes near this place, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understood? Eleanor nodded, swallowing her disappointment. For a moment she had thought he was going to kiss her, and she had wanted him to with an intensity that surprised her. But Harrison was still fighting his feelings, still trying to keep the promise he had made to his dead wife's memory. That night, Harrison showed her how to bar the door and windows from inside, how to escape through the back window if necessary, where he kept extra ammunition and supplies. He was thorough and patient, making sure she understood everything. When he was satisfied she could defend the cabin, he finally settled down by the fire on his usual pallet. But Eleanor could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to Harrison's breathing, thinking about what tomorrow might bring. What if Carson had gathered more men? What if they ambushed Harrison on the trail? She had only just found safety and companionship. She could not bear the thought of losing it already. Finally, unable to stand it anymore, she got up and moved to where Harrison lay. He was not asleep either, she could tell by the tension in his body. Harrison? You should be sleeping. So should you. Eleanor sat down beside his pallet. I'm scared. I know. But I will be careful, and I will come back. I promise you that. It is not just that. Eleanor took a breath, gathering her courage. I'm scared of what I'm feeling. For you. Harrison sat up, his face half in shadow. Eleanor, do not... Let me say this, please. You told me you buried your heart with your family, and I understand that. I'm not asking you for anything. But I need you to know that being here with you these past weeks has been the happiest I have been since my mother died. You have shown me kindness and respect, and taught me I have worth beyond serving men who see me as nothing. And I care about you, Harrison. So please, come back safe. Not for anything more than we have now, but just come back. For a long moment, Harrison said nothing. Then he reached out and pulled her into his arms, holding her against his broad chest. Eleanor could hear his heart beating fast beneath her ear. I care about you too, he said roughly, more than I thought I could care about anyone again. And that terrifies me, Eleanor, because I lost everyone I loved once, and I do not know if I could survive losing someone again. Then do not lose me. Do not get yourself killed trying to protect me. I will not. He tilted her face up to his, and in the firelight, his eyes were soft. I have something to live for now, someone to come home to. That makes me more dangerous than Carson could ever imagine. Then he kissed her, gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid she might break. But Eleanor kissed him back, with all the longing and fear and hope swirling inside her, and Harrison's arms tightened around her. The kiss deepened, becoming something fierce and claiming, a promise made without words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. I thought I was dead inside, he whispered, but you brought me back to life. You did the same for me, Eleanor said. We saved each other. Harrison carried her to the bed, and they lay down together, wrapped in each other's arms. There was nothing improper about it. They were both fully clothed, but it felt intimate in ways that went beyond physical. They held each other through the night, finding comfort in the simple fact of not being alone anymore. When dawn broke, Harrison rose and prepared for his journey. Eleanor made him a substantial breakfast and packed food for the trail. She checked his weapons and made sure he had everything he needed, all the while fighting the urge to beg him not to go. 2 days, Harrison said as he mounted his bay gelding. 3 at most if I have to deal with a lot of stupidity in town. You stay here, keep the rifle close, and do not take any chances. I will not. You be careful. Eleanor reached up, and Harrison leaned down to kiss her once more, a quick but tender press of lips that nevertheless made her heart soar. Then he was riding away, and Eleanor stood on the porch watching until he disappeared from view. The valley felt emptier without him, the cabin too quiet. She tried to keep busy, working in the garden and doing chores, but her mind was always on Harrison and what he might be facing in town. The first day passed slowly. Eleanor kept the rifle close at all times, jumping at every sound, but no one came, and gradually she relaxed a little. She made bread and stew, mended more of Harrison's clothes, and read from his books in the evening. But she missed him terribly, missed his steady presence and deep voice, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. The second day was harder. Eleanor could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. She paced the cabin, unable to settle to any task for long. What if Carson had killed Harrison? What if he was lying hurt somewhere on the trail? What if he never came back? By evening, she was nearly frantic with worry. She stood on the porch as the sun set, straining her ears for the sound of hoofbeats. Nothing. Darkness fell, and still Harrison did not return. Eleanor barely slept that night, getting up every hour to check outside. But the valley remained empty and silent. As dawn broke on the third day, she made a decision. If Harrison was not back by noon, she would ride to town looking for him. It was dangerous and probably foolish, but she could not just sit here anymore not knowing. But at mid-morning, just as she was saddling the paint mare, she heard the blessed sound of a horse approaching. Eleanor ran out of the stable to see Harrison riding into the valley, and she felt as if she could breathe again for the first time in 2 days. He looked tired and dusty but unharmed, and when he saw her, his stern expression softened into something that made Eleanor's heart flip. He dismounted and she threw herself at him, not caring if it was proper or ladylike. Harrison caught her easily, his strong arms wrapping around her and lifting her off her feet. "You are all right," Eleanor said into his chest, tears streaming down her face. "I was so worried." "I'm fine. I'm sorry I was gone longer than expected." Harrison set her down but did not release her, his hands cupping her face. "God, I missed you. I hated every minute I was away from you." "What happened? Did you find Carson?" "I did. He and his friends were in the saloon, drinking and bragging about what they were going to do to you when they came back here with reinforcements." Harrison's jaw tightened. "I walked in and called him out in front of everyone, told him if he ever came near you again, I would kill him. He tried to act tough, said I could not stop him." "What did you do?" "I beat him unconscious in about 30 seconds, Harrison said flatly. "Then I did the same to his 2 friends. Then I stood there and told the entire saloon that you were under my protection, and anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with me right then and there. No one did." Eleanor should probably have been shocked by the violence, but instead she felt only relief and a fierce kind of pride. Harrison had defended her honor and her safety without killing anyone, which showed restraint she was not sure she would have had in his position. "Then I went to the sheriff and filed a formal complaint against Carson for trespassing and threatening you. The sheriff is a decent man, and he was not happy to hear what Carson had done. He told Carson if he went near you or this valley again, he would be arrested. And Carson knows the sheriff means it." "So it is really over?" "It is really over. You are safe, Eleanor. No one will bother you again." Harrison smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look years younger. "And I paid off the last of your father's debts to anyone who had a legitimate claim. You are completely free now, free to do whatever you want with your life." Eleanor looked up at him, this strong, gentle man who had come into her life like a force of nature and changed everything. She knew what she wanted to do with her life, with her freedom. She wanted to stay here in this beautiful valley with Harrison, building a life together. But she needed to know if he wanted that too. "What if what I want is to stay here with you?" she asked quietly. Harrison's eyes darkened with emotion. "Then I would say, that is what I want more than anything in the world. These past 2 days away from you, all I could think about was getting back here, back to you. You have become my home, Eleanor, not this cabin or this valley, but you." "I love you," Eleanor said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "I know it is fast and maybe too soon, but I do. I love you, Harrison. It is not too soon. I think I started loving you the moment I saw you through that saloon window, looking so lost and brave at the same time." Harrison kissed her deeply, pouring all his feeling into it. "I love you, Eleanor Reeves. Will you stay with me? Will you make a life here with me?" "Yes, yes to everything." They stood there holding each other as the sun climbed higher in the sky, and Eleanor felt a happiness so complete it was almost painful. She had been so lost, so beaten down, and now she was found. She was loved. She was home. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and blossomed. Harrison courted her properly, despite the fact that they were living alone together in the mountains. He brought her wildflowers and carved her a beautiful jewelry box from pine wood. He taught her to fish in the creek and how to track animals through the forest. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing their histories and dreams for the future. Eleanor, for her part, transformed the cabin into a true home. She made curtains for the windows and braided a rag rug for the floor. She planted herbs in pots on the porch and started a root cellar for winter storage. She cooked meals that filled the cabin with delicious smells and made Harrison close his eyes in appreciation. And she loved him with a fierce devotion that seemed to grow stronger every day. One evening in late September, as the aspen trees turned gold and the air carried the first hint of coming winter, Harrison took Eleanor for a walk to a place he had never shown anyone before. It was a meadow high on the mountain, filled with late-blooming wildflowers and offering a view of the entire valley below. "I come here sometimes when I need to think," Harrison explained as they stood together watching the sunset. "I came here a lot that first year after Mary and Sarah died, trying to make sense of losing them. For a long time, I thought I would never be happy again. I thought that part of my life was over." "And now?" Eleanor asked softly. "Now I know that love does not die just because the people we love do. Mary and Sarah will always be part of me, always have a place in my heart, but that does not mean I cannot love again. They would want me to be happy, to have a full life. And I am happy, Eleanor. With you, I am truly happy." Harrison dropped to one knee in the meadow, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. When he opened it, Eleanor gasped. Inside was a ring made of gold, delicately carved with a pattern of flowers. "Bah, I made this," Harrison said. "I learned some metalwork before I came west, though I have not practiced it in years. The gold I panned from a creek about a mile from here took me a week to get enough. The pattern is mountain laurel, which grows all through this valley. Eleanor Reeves, will you marry me? Will you let me love you for the rest of our lives?" Eleanor could barely see him through her tears. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and kissed her, as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, and Eleanor felt as if her heart might burst from sheer joy. They rode to town a week later to be married. The sheriff, a kind man named Robert Thompson, agreed to perform the ceremony, and his wife Susan served as a witness along with the town's general store owner. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the elaborate wedding Eleanor had sometimes dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect because it joined her life to Harrison's. Eleanor wore a new dress that Susan had helped her make, a deep blue that brought out her eyes. Harrison wore clean buckskins and had trimmed his beard, though his long hair still flowed past his shoulders. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for all their days, Eleanor saw tears in Harrison's gray eyes and knew he meant every word with his whole heart. They stayed in town just long enough to file the marriage certificate and purchase supplies for winter, then rode back to their valley. Their valley now, Eleanor thought with satisfaction. Their home. That night they came together as husband and wife, and it was everything Eleanor had hoped for and more. Harrison was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and he made sure her pleasure matched his own. Afterward they lay tangled together in the bed, and Eleanor traced the scars on Harrison's chest marks from his hard life in the mountains. "I never thought I would feel this way again," Harrison murmured, his fingers threading through her hair. "Safe, content, like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "You are," Eleanor said, kissing his chest. "We both are." Winter came to the mountains in November, transforming their valley into a wonderland of snow and ice. Harrison had prepared well, and they had plenty of food and firewood to last until spring. The days were short and the nights long, but Eleanor did not mind. She spent her time cooking, reading, sewing, and learning all the skills Harrison could teach her about surviving in the wilderness. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, but neither of them felt trapped. Instead, those long winter months brought them closer together. They talked and made love and planned for the future. Harrison taught Eleanor to play chess using pieces he had carved himself, and she taught him songs her mother used to sing. They read books aloud to each other by the fireplace and made plans for expanding the garden in spring. Christmas was simple but special. Harrison had secretly carved Eleanor a set of wooden hair combs decorated with tiny flowers, and she had made him a new shirt from cloth she had purchased in town. They roasted a wild turkey Harrison had shot and made a feast with all the trimmings. As they sat together after dinner, full and content, Eleanor reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How different this is from last Christmas. I was alone, working at that terrible saloon, wondering if I would ever have anything to be grateful for again. And now look at me. I have a home, a husband who loves me, a life that feels full of possibility. It is like a miracle." "You are my miracle," Harrison said, kissing her temple. "You brought me back to life when I thought I was dead inside. I thank God every day that I walked past that saloon window and saw you." Spring came gradually, the snow melting to reveal the valley's green beauty once more. Eleanor discovered she was with child in April, and Harrison's joy was so overwhelming it brought tears to both their eyes. He became even more protective than before, insisting she not work too hard and constantly checking to make sure she was feeling all right. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Eleanor laughed one day when Harrison tried to stop her from lifting a bucket of water. "I know, but I cannot help it. You are carrying our child, that is precious beyond measure." Harrison placed his large hand over her still flat stomach. "I thought I would never have this again, a family, children, a future." "We are going to have it all," Eleanor promised him. "Everything you lost, we are going to build it back together." As her belly grew round with their child, Eleanor worked to prepare everything they would need. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets while Harrison built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. They argued amiably over names. Harrison wanted to honor his mother if it was a girl, while Eleanor wanted to honor Harrison's daughter, Sarah. "What if we compromise?" Eleanor suggested one evening as they sat on the porch watching the summer sunset. "If it is a girl, we could name her Sarah Helen. That honors both your daughter and your mother." Harrison pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "That would be perfect. And if it is a boy?" "Henry James," Eleanor said, "after both our fathers. Henry James Xavier." Harrison tried it out, nodding. "I like it. Either way, this child is going to know they are loved more than anything in this world." Their son was born in late October, as the aspens turned gold and the first snow dusted the mountain peaks. The birth was long and difficult, and more than once Harrison feared he might lose Eleanor. But she was strong, stronger than he had ever imagined, and as dawn broke, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that filled the cabin. Harrison held his boy for the first time and wept openly, all the grief and fear and love of the past years pouring out of him. This tiny, perfect person was a gift he had never expected to receive again, a second chance at fatherhood, at building a family. "Henry," he whispered, looking down at his son's scrunched red face, "Henry James Xavier, Welcome to the world, little man. Eleanor watched from the bed, exhausted but radiantly happy. He looks just like you. Poor kid, Harrison joked, but his heart was full to overflowing. He brought the baby to Eleanor, placing him in her arms, and watched as Henry latched onto Nurse for the first time. His family, his wife and son, his reason for being. The early months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Henry was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he seemed to thrive in the mountain air. Harrison was an attentive father, taking his turn walking the baby when he cried at night and making Eleanor rest whenever she needed. He was amazed by every milestone: Henry's first smile, the first time he rolled over, the way he would track his parents with his eyes. "I had forgotten how wonderful this is," Harrison said one night, rocking Henry to sleep. "How precious and fleeting. Every moment matters." "We will not take any of it for granted," Eleanor promised. "Every single day with him, with you, is a gift." As Henry grew into a chubby, happy toddler, their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison continued to work his trap lines and hunt, while Eleanor managed the cabin and garden and cared for their son. But everything was easier now, because they had each other. They were partners in every sense of the word, sharing the work and the joy and the challenges. When Henry was 2, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter in the spring. They named her Sarah Helen, as they had planned, and Harrison held his daughter with tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I would have a daughter again," he told Eleanor, his voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this." "We gave it to each other," Eleanor said softly. "This family, this life, we built it together." Sarah was as different from Henry as night from day, where he was sturdy and adventurous. She was delicate and thoughtful. But both children were deeply loved, and they grew up knowing their parents would do anything for them. The years passed quickly, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Harrison taught Henry to ride and track and shoot, while Eleanor taught both children to read and write and do their numbers. They were isolated from much of the world in their mountain valley, but they were not lonely. They had each other, and that was enough. When visitors occasionally came through, trappers or travelers who had heard of the mountain man and his family, they always commented on how happy everyone seemed. The children were well-behaved and bright-eyed, clearly thriving despite their unusual upbringing. Eleanor was gracious and kind, a true lady even in her simple homespun dresses. And Harrison, the fearsome mountain man, was gentle with his family in a way that contrasted startlingly with his intimidating size and strength. One summer day, when Henry was 7 and Sarah 5, a group of trappers stopped by on their way through the mountains. Among them was an older man who looked at Harrison for a long moment before speaking. "Harrison Xavier? Is that really you?" Harrison studied the man, then recognition dawned. "Tom Miller? From Missouri? The same? Lord, I heard you had disappeared west after the fever. I never expected to find you up here." Tom looked around at the cabin, the children playing in the yard, Eleanor hanging laundry. "You have built yourself quite a life." "I have," Harrison agreed, "more than I ever thought possible." Over dinner that night, Tom told them news from the east. The country was growing and changing rapidly. Towns were springing up all over the frontier, railroads were being built, civilization was creeping ever westward. Harrison listened with interest, but no real longing. His life was here in these mountains with his family. He had no desire to return to the world he had left behind. After Tom and his companions left the next morning, Eleanor found Harrison standing on the porch, looking out over their valley. "Are you all right?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Better than all right. I was just thinking about the day I saw you in that saloon. If I'd walked past that window a minute earlier or later, if I'd not looked in, our whole lives would be different. You might still be there, serving those cruel men. I might still be alone, just existing instead of living. It amazes me how one moment can change everything." "You changed everything," Eleanor said. "You took me away from that terrible place and gave me a life I did not know was possible. You let me be served instead of always serving others. You treated me like I mattered." "You did matter. You do matter. You are everything to me, Eleanor. You and our children, you are my whole world." Eleanor leaned against her husband's strong shoulder, watching their children play in the yard. Henry was teaching Sarah to skip stones in the creek, his patience with his little sister, a reflection of how Harrison treated them both. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not grand gestures or fancy things, but this a family that loved each other, a home that was safe and warm, a life that had meaning and purpose. "I love you," she told Harrison, as she did every day. "I love the life we have built together." "And I love you," Harrison replied, pulling her close. "My Eleanor, my heart, my home." The years continued to pass, each one adding to their story. They had 2 more children, another son named Thomas, and a daughter they called Grace. The cabin was expanded to accommodate their growing family, with additional rooms added as needed. The garden grew larger, producing enough vegetables to last them through the long winters. Harrison's trap lines remained profitable, providing income for the few things they could not make or grow themselves. The children grew into fine young people. Henry developed his father's size and strength, becoming skilled at hunting and trapping. Sarah inherited her mother's love of books and learning, reading everything she could get her hands on. Thomas was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into mischief, while Grace was the peacemaker, keeping harmony among her siblings. When Henry turned 18, he announced his intention to build his own cabin on the far side of the valley and start trapping on his own. Harrison was proud of his son's independence and helped him construct a sturdy cabin. Within a year, Henry had brought home a wife, a young woman from town named Margaret, who was brave enough to embrace mountain life. Sarah eventually married a teacher who came west looking for adventure. He was willing to live in the mountains to be near her family, and he helped teach the younger children when they were old enough. Thomas and Grace both eventually found partners as well, and the valley became home to an extended family that grew with each generation. Through it all, Harrison and Eleanor remained at the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew older together, their hair turning gray and their bodies showing the wear of hard work and mountain life. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Eleanor back to the meadow where he had proposed. It looked much the same as it had all those years ago, though they were different people now. Older, wiser, marked by both joy and sorrow, for they had lost Grace's husband to a hunting accident and weathered other hardships over the years, but still deeply in love. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked as they stood together watching the sunset. "Staying here with me instead of going back to civilization? You could have had an easier life." "Not a better life," Eleanor said firmly. "Never a better life. You gave me everything that matters, Harrison. Love, family, a home, respect. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You valued me when I thought I had no value. How could I ever regret that?" "I am the one who should be grateful," Harrison said, his arm around her shoulders. "You brought me back from the dead, Eleanor. You gave me a reason to live again when I thought my life was over. You gave me children and grandchildren and a legacy I never thought I would have. Every good thing in my life came from the day I walked past that saloon window and saw you." They stood together in the meadow as the sun painted the sky in familiar shades of rose and gold, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was rich beyond measure. Below them, their valley spread out in peaceful beauty, home to the family they had created together. "To think it all started because you saw me serving men who mocked me," Eleanor mused, "and you took me away and let me be served." "You deserve to be cherished," Harrison said simply. "You deserve to be loved, and I've spent every day of our marriage trying to show you that." "You have succeeded," Eleanor told him, reaching up to cup his bearded face. Though he was past 60 now, she still saw the strong, fierce man who had saved her all those years ago. "You have succeeded beyond measure, my love." They kissed as they had in this same meadow 3 decades before, 2 people who had saved each other and built a life together in the wild beauty of the mountains. Their story was one of heartbreak transformed into healing, of loneliness turned into love, of 2 broken people who found wholeness in each other. Years later, when Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Eleanor held his hand and whispered her gratitude for every moment they had shared. She missed him terribly in the months that followed, but she was not alone. Their children and grandchildren surrounded her, filling the cabin with life and love, a living testament to what she and Harrison had built together. Eleanor lived for another 5 years, spending her days with her family and her evenings writing down the story of how she and Harrison had found each other. She wanted their grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know how it had started with a mountain man who looked through a saloon window and saw a woman who needed saving and who had the courage and compassion to act. When Eleanor died at 71, peacefully in her sleep like Harrison, she was buried next to him on the hillside overlooking their valley. Their children planted wildflowers over both graves, and every spring those flowers bloomed in profusion, filling the air with sweetness. The valley remained home to their descendants for generations. The original cabin became a cherished landmark, preserved and maintained by each new generation as a reminder of where they came from. The story of Harrison and Eleanor was passed down through the years, told and retold, until it became almost legend, the mountain man who saved the woman from the cruel men who mocked her, who took her away to his mountain home and let her be served instead of always serving others, and how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love story that spanned decades and created a legacy that would endure for generations. For in the end, their story was not just about rescue or romance. It was about two people who had lost everything finding each other in the wilderness and building something beautiful from their shared pain. It was about choosing love even when it seemed impossible, about having the courage to open your heart again after devastating loss. It was about seeing worth in another person when the world saw nothing, and about the transformative power of being truly seen and valued. Harrison had taken Eleanor away from the saloon where men mocked and diminished her, but she had done something equally important. She had taken him away from the isolation and grief that had consumed him. They had saved each other in the truest sense, and from that mutual salvation had come a family, a legacy, and a love that transcended even death. Their graves on the hillside became a place where their descendants came to remember, to celebrate, and to draw strength from the knowledge that they came from people who had loved deeply and built something lasting. And every spring, when the wildflowers bloomed over those graves, it was as if Harrison and Eleanor were still there, still together, still reminding everyone who came after that love could grow even in the hardest soil, and that sometimes the greatest adventures began with a single moment of compassion. The valley they had called home remained as beautiful as ever, a testament to the life they had built together in the wild mountains of Utah. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, when the wind sighed through the pines and the creek sang its eternal song, you might almost hear echoes of their voices, Harrison's deep and steady, Eleanor's warm and gentle still, talking and laughing together, still sharing the easy companionship of two people who had found in each other everything they needed. Their story had a beginning in a grimy saloon in Taylorsville, where a desperate woman served men who mocked her and a mountain man saw her through a window. It had a middle filled with love and children and the daily joys and challenges of mountain life, and it had an ending on a hillside covered with wildflowers, where two people who had saved each other finally rested together, their love story complete, but their legacy continuing on through every generation that followed. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect life. Not perfect because it was easy, it was not, but perfect because it was lived fully, with courage and love and an unwavering commitment to each other. Harrison and Eleanor Xavier had taken their broken pieces and made something whole, something beautiful, something that would endure long after they were gone. And in the end, that was the truest measure of their love, not in grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though their story had those too, but in the quiet, steady devotion they showed each other every single day for more than 30 years. In the way Harrison always brought Eleanor coffee first thing in the morning. In the way Eleanor always waited on the porch to greet him when he came home from checking his trap lines. In the thousand small kindnesses and considerations that wove their lives together into something unbreakable. Their family gathered every year on the anniversary of their wedding, coming from wherever they had settled to spend time together in the valley where it all began. They would tell the story again, how great-grandfather Harrison had seen great-grandmother Eleanor serving men who mocked her, how he had walked into that saloon and changed both their lives forever. The children would listen with wide eyes, absorbing the lesson that love could overcome anything, that one person's courage could change the course of history, that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. And then, They would walk up the hillside to where Harrison and Eleanor lay together beneath the wildflowers, and they would give thanks for the legacy they had inherited. A legacy of love and strength, of perseverance and compassion, of two people who had refused to let their losses define them and had instead chosen to build something new and beautiful together. The mountain man and the woman he saved had become something greater than just individuals. They had become the foundation of a family, the heart of a community, and proof that love could triumph over even the darkest circumstances. Their story would be told as long as there were descendants to tell it, passed down through the generations as both history and inspiration. And every spring, without fail, the wildflowers would bloom over their graves, pink and yellow and purple, covering the hillside in a riot of color that could be seen from the valley below. It was as if the earth itself was celebrating them, acknowledging the love they had shared and the life they had built together in these wild, beautiful mountains. Harrison and Eleanor Xavier had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, had loved each other with a depth that transcended time, and had left behind a legacy that would endure forever. Theirs was a love story for the ages, born in hardship, nurtured in the wilderness, and perfected through the years they spent building a life together. From the moment Harrison had seen Eleanor through that saloon window and recognized a kindred spirit who needed help, to the moment they lay down together for the last time on that hillside overlooking their valley, every day had been a gift. Every moment they spent together had been precious. Every challenge they faced had only strengthened their bond. They had truly saved each other, and in doing so, they had created something that would outlast them both: a family, a home, a love that would echo through the generations. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift they could have given each other and the world. Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their legacy assured. The mountain man had seen her serving the men who mocked her, had taken her away, and had let her be served. And from that simple act of compassion had grown something extraordinary, a love that would never die, a story that would never be forgotten, and a family that would carry their memory forward into the future. The end.